still against severe outcomes, but against, in terms of trying to stave off serious outcomes and symptomatic disease, one needs to refresh the immune system with what is actually circulating. And so it's a benefit risk here. We believe that the benefits of receiving a booster now, at least 2 months after, are going to outweigh the risks. And I think we're really focusing a lot here on 2 months, but if you look at the average time that since most people have been boosted, it will be many months more than that. And for half of Americans, it's going to probably be more than a year because the half who have not ever received a booster got their primary series and really could use this third dose. In fact, getting this third dose of vaccine for those individuals who only received a primary series can probably reduce by more than half their chance of long COVID if they get COVID-19. So there are a variety of reasons, and that's published in the Journal of the American Medical Associations in July of this year. So this is a reason to try to move forward to help bring us protection now. Another reason for getting this out there, just is in case you look at modeling, is that we are looking at a possible fall wave with a peak around December 1st. And by giving the booster now, we will hopefully both control the current plateau that we're in, even though we're dropping off very slowly, as well as address this future potential wave that looms out there.
Yeah, I'd like to just reemphasize what Dr. Mark said about long COVID. You know, our data on long COVID are obviously not as strong as the protection against death and hospitalization. But as more data come in and you look at it, it's convincing that the more up to date you are in your vaccination, the more and likely the more updated your vaccination for this variant, the greater the chance that you'll be protected with a reduced risk of long COVID, which for young people is increasingly a major concern.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Cheyenne Hazlitt at ABC.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. How confident are you both that these new bivalent boosters will better protect against COVID? For example, do you think there will be less breakthrough cases, or do you feel confident that it will protect even better against hospitalizations and death? What do you anticipate?
Dr. Marks, I'll let you start with this one too.
Okay, so thanks. So that's a good question. And the question is, what does the BA.4/5 component potentially add here? It is matched to what is currently circulating. And the hope here is that by increasing the amount of antibodies we have to that particular variant, we will restore the kind of protection that we had when we first saw these vaccines launched in the late part of 2020 and early part of 2021, where we had very good protection against symptomatic disease. We don't know for a fact yet whether we will get to that same level, but that is the goal here. And that is what we believe the evidence that we've seen helps point to. But obviously, we'll be conducting vaccine surveillance to see how closely we've gotten to this. But just let me make it clear that even giving another prototype booster, the same original version of the vaccine, would probably help us, but it might only help us for a short period of time. The idea here is not just to increase the antibodies right now, but also to hopefully give us a longer duration of protection, because the hope here is not to have to give lots of vaccines each year. It's hopefully to have this be the vaccine that hopefully holds us for as much of this or for the entire season if it can.
Yeah, if I might add a little perspective, I was commissioner in 2016, also a relatively quiescent period with regard to American health. We didn't have a pandemic going on. And a big difference here is we have to be a step ahead, or at least we have to try to be a step ahead, because if we waited for all the proof to come in, the wave will have already passed us by and the damage will have been done. And I know that you're aware that we had a major advisory committee meeting in July. Dr. Marks has already referred to it. The advice was clear from the panel that to go with an Omicron-specific vaccine. We know the circulating variant. It's remarkable how the messenger RNA technology enabled a rapid turnaround of the vaccine. But it's still the case that, you know, the proof will be in the pudding of the surveillance that Dr. Marks said. But this is the best judgment. I can't, I think you know how many people weighed in on this. And it's fair for people to raise questions. But this really is the best consensus that we have among the experts that this is the best way to go. And particularly watching, it's just painful to see people dying unnecessarily when there's a free treatment that would prevent their death. And, as a cardiologist in my career, I spent my career trying to save lives. This is much more clear than anything I've ever seen.
Thank you. Our next question is from Matt Herbert at STAT. I would just like to remind all reporters to please unmute and put your camera on as well.
All right, sorry, John, I'm using technology. So I know that I hear the confidence you guys have in the data here, but when will we have clinical data on either of these bivalent vaccines in terms of immunogenicity data? And what's the timeline for surveillance data to measure safety? When can people expect to learn more?
Before Dr. Marks answers, you can imagine how many discussions we've had about this. And a caution that, Matt, I know that you know a lot about is if we jump to preliminary data, we can be easily misled one direction or the other. So giving an exact date is going to be really hard to do, but no one's more anxious than we are to have the data available and to get it out there once we have solid data to talk about. So Dr. Marks, you might comment on your latest discussions with the manufacturers.
Yeah, so I mean, I think Dr. Califf is right. We want to make sure that when we make data available publicly, that we're confident in those data, because a couple times during this pandemic, I personally have experienced where we went forward too quickly and had to double back. So I think we want to make sure that when we come out with data, it's data that we trust, and that will probably be, we're probably at least 1 to 2 months off from having those data because of the time it takes to actually dose and then do the assays, et cetera. That said, both manufacturers are diligently conducting the clinical trials that are needed to get this done.
Dr. Marks, would you be willing to share what those moments were when you had to go back and change based on early data?
I think I'm willing to just say that I think some of the convalescent plasma experience, as you may well know, was a little bit challenging, and I'll leave it at that.
And Matt, I know you know this, but we could recount hundreds of times in the history of clinical trials where looking at interim preliminary data has been misleading.
Thank you. Our next question is from Fiona Rutherford at Bloomberg. Please turn on your camera and unmute your mic.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. Some people have expressed that there is no human data showing that these boosters are effective or add much incremental benefit. So could you explain, do you have any comments on that?
Well, Fiona, I feel like we've covered it, but I think it's worth reiterating, because I know this is the #1 question that people are asking, and there's been a lot of discussion in the press about it already. So I'll ask Dr. Marks sort of to go through the hierarchy of evidence or the totality of evidence as he described it.
Yeah, no, thanks. So What we're doing here is what we do every year for influenza vaccine, which is we understand how the vaccine works really well. And that's something that I think we understand about the mRNA vaccine platform. There is a genetic sequence in the that is basically that encodes a protein, and that is what we're using here for vaccination. So we understand how the vaccine works. We understand from 2 different manufacturers how they've 3 times over now for 3 different variants besides the original vaccine have made they've made boosters potentially because we thought we might need them for other variants such as Delta or Omicron BA1, and they've shown that they produce very good immune responses in humans, and they were safe, granted in a small number of individuals relatively, but in aggregate now, in enough people to feel comfortable that when we change the sequence of these vaccines, we will see an immune response to the protein that's produced that will be robust. We have those data from humans, plus we have non-clinical data, again, data from animal experiments that help bolster our impression that this should produce a better response. And that's our expectation for these, and we'll see whether that's borne out. Again, no matter what, honestly, we get in terms of incremental benefit here, it's really important for people to think about getting boosted because that prototype, that original booster that's there, plus this, will hopefully give us the kind of immunity we need right now to, again, tamp down the wave we have going through the country now, and hopefully bring us the protection we need through October, November, December to prevent yet another wave that shuts down things like holiday plans, et cetera.
Yeah, I'd like to emphasize the point made that people should remember that this contains the prototype vaccine also. So the BA.4/5 component is additional to the prototype. And so people should have confidence that there will be a boost in immune status, just like the previous boosters I've done. And again, I'd emphasize, we're not talking about trivial things here. We're talking about prevention of death and hospitalization as an outcome. It's just me, but I'll also tell you, I'm turning 71 next month. I will be at the front of the line at the pharmacy getting my vaccination. I'm very confident about this.
Thanks very much. Our next question is from Danny Al-Farouk at RAPS.
Thanks so much, Dr. Marks and Dr. Califf. I wanted to ask, the UK approved the bivalent that included the BA1 components, but the US waited until we got the BA4 and BA5. Could you kind of talk about the reasoning behind why we waited, especially considering Moderna said they had tens of millions of doses waiting in their stockpile? And secondly, kind of, I know we've kind of covered a lot of this, but when you talk about non-clinical data, is that animal studies that you're talking about? And if so, is this the first time, or has there been a situation in the past where you've allowed this kind of vaccine on the market simply based on animal studies?
Well, I do appreciate the questions, and as you might imagine, there have been a lot of discussions with international regulators about the BA1 versus BA.4/5. And Dr. Marks has had many more of those discussions than I have, including very recently. I think you'll have an interesting perspective to share there. But again, I want to take exception to your comment about only animal studies. I think Dr. Marks reviewed the totality of evidence that, this is a type of vaccine that has now been given to billions of people, and we have a good understanding of how it works. So it's not like something just coming out of the hopper with just animal studies. But Dr. Marks, if you could comment.
No, I'll start with that second part. I think we're pretty confident that what we have is very similar to the situation that we've done in the past with influenza strain changes, where we don't do clinical studies for them in the United States. We know from the way the vaccine works and from the data that we have that we can predict how well the vaccine will be working. Now, clearly, influenza is very challenging because it's constantly changing as well. Just to back up, though, into the difference between BA1 and BA.4/5. This, I really appreciate the question. It's an opportunity to just make this clear. We very deliberately picked BA.4/5 for several reasons. First of all, right now, BA1 is no longer circulating in the United States. It's not there. We have about 90%, 88%, I think, as of Nowcast yesterday, 88% BA.5, about 6% BA.4.6. And so this gives us a variant that is most up to date and will most likely look closer to something that may evolve further in the fall. It's no guarantee, but the idea here is the more up to date you are, the better chance we have of looking at what may come afterwards. Additionally, there's a slightly technical point that I will make. The BA1 immunogen, the protein itself, is not quite as good from studies that have done this. It's not quite as good as the BA.4/5. Those are suggestive studies. They're not definitive, but they suggest that, and they seem to be confirmed by a study that has been published by Penny Moore from South Africa, where it was shown that the immune response in that population, now this is not to vaccine, this is to natural infection, but the immune response to the BA.4/5 variant was much more robust against a variety of other variants, including BA1, Delta, Beta, than the response to BA1. So that, again, goes into this totality of evidence that makes us feel comfortable that this was a good choice.
And let me just add, lest it sound like we're just in an international argument here, it really, if we look at the hierarchy of what's important, the number one thing is that people get boosted and up to date. Far and away, number one. The BA.4/5 is icing on the cake, and based on the scientific reasoning that Dr. Marks has put forward. But I think we'd all agree that if you're not up to date and you haven't been boosted at all, or you haven't been vaccinated, that's the primary issue here.
Thank you. Our next question is from Alex Tin at CBS.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. Can you explain for us what are the data you're waiting for to authorize the same kind of changes, but in the primary series for adults? And what are the data you're waiting for to make that same kind of change for boosters down to 6 months old? When should we expect those decisions? Thanks so much.
Peter, yeah, if you're
happy. Let me take the second question, because I know from I appreciate the letters from parents who are very interested in these, and I actually appreciate the fact that they've been very polite. Actually, they want to know when they're going to have their boosters. I appreciate that. We are waiting for the companies to submit data from children on these, and we would expect. Again, I can't promise an exact timing, but we expect to start seeing the age range drop down into the younger age ranges within the next 1 to 2 months. And so as we get submissions from the companies, we will act on them with all due diligence because we're aware that there are, particularly in the slightly older age ranges of children, some children that are coming due for boosters. So that's that situation. As for the issue of when we move to the bivalent type of vaccine for the primary series, we had a discussion of this at our vaccines advisory committee meeting. This topic came up. We're considering this a transitional year where we feel like everyone needs to get this base of immunity that we understand really well, because 500 million people in the world have received it. And we believe that building on that is important. So those who have not yet been vaccinated, if they decide to go out and get vaccinated, which I hope they will, either get their 2 doses 3 or 4 weeks apart. And then 2 months after that, they'll be up to date as well when they go get their booster. So I think this makes sure that everyone has this good base upon which we build upon, which will help protect us against the unknown. Probably, if I had to say what keeps me up at night most in this pandemic, it's that we have seen lots of twists and turns that were hard to predict. So it's the unknown unknowns that really are concerning. So we don't know what may come up later this year. And by doing this, we've tried to mitigate against that by making sure that we understand the protection very well, the base level of protection that people have.
And can you clarify, so in children down to 6 months, it's administration of the BA.4/5 booster, that's the data you're waiting for, not the BA.1?
So it's a variety, there's a variety of different data, and I can't go into what might be in pending submissions, but there's a variety of different data that may be coming in.
Yeah, I would just emphasize so far our vaccination rate in the younger children is very low in this country. And I hope parents will pick up the pace on vaccination of younger children.
And I just have to pile on to Dr. Califf's comment here, because there are some concerns. We keep in touch with pediatricians and adult doctors across the country, and there are some concerns coming in from pediatric hospitals. The press on the call can feel free to check in with some of them, that they've started to see increasing rates of hospitalization of kids, even while the adult their hospitalization rates may be coming down some. So yet another reason to consider having your child vaccinated.
Thank you. We have time for one last question. Our last question is from Mike Ehrman at Reuters. Please unmute your mic and turn on your camera.
Hi, thanks. I'm wondering what the FDA is hoping the effect will be of running a broader revaccination campaign that includes young, healthy Americans versus the more limited campaign that was run earlier this year. And what's the evidence that these updated boosters are going to offer increased protection for younger, healthy Americans versus older and immunocompromised Americans?
Well, let me start out just by saying that far and away, the number one thing is to get the high-risk people vaccinated. So we do want to emphasize that. People my age are very much at risk compared to younger people for death and hospitalization particularly. But I think we've also been heavily influenced by the emerging data about long COVID, which, if anything, is stacked preferentially in the younger people. And of course, I used to be young, so I remember that you feel invincible when you're young and you don't think about this until you happen to get sick. But once you get long COVID, it looks like from the data, it's there for a long time. And so this combination of factors, I think, turns out to be very important in younger people. I'm sure Dr. Marks will want to correct anything I said wrong there.
Dr. Califf said it very well. I think, Michael, I think the issue here is very true. I know that let's be open and honest. There are some critics that say we only should be concerned about the older population here. But I would say to you that given what we know of long COVID, and given the number of telephone calls I take from 20 to 30-year-olds who have long COVID, that we really do need to take seriously the fact that in aggregate now we have millions of Americans who have long COVID symptoms. And that I can tell you from interacting with some of them, it's very real. The brain fog, in some cases, the mood changes, people who used to be very bright and cheery, who now are anxious and depressed. Those things seem to be very real, and they are actually well described now. And so I think the ability to try to reduce that long COVID, particularly again for the half of people who have never been boosted, those are the people who are actually at most risk of those long COVID symptoms. If you've never had a vaccine, you're really at highest risk for those if you get COVID. And if you've never been boosted, you're at reasonably high risk. So those would be the reasons. We could probably go into other reasons about trying to decrease the replication of this virus, trying to decrease transmission. But we know that these vaccines are not perfect there. But you could actually, we could make the public health case there as well. But I'll leave it at that. Really, hopefully, long COVID itself is one of the good rationales here for people to get vaccinated.
Do you expect that you'd be?
Oh, it looks like he froze. I think he was going to ask, do you expect you'll be able to prevent it? And I would say if anything is going to prevent transmission in long COVID, it's going to be a variant-specific vaccine for the variant that's currently circulating. That's actually highly motivational to us because the waning of effectiveness against infection as the variants change is something that we'd like to be able to preempt, so to speak.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us here today and participating in this press conference. We invite you to visit our website at fda.gov for more information about the authorizations. This concludes today's FDA press conference. A replay will be available on the FDA's YouTube page. If you have follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to contact the FDA press office at fdaoma@fda.hhs.gov. Thank you and have a great day.